Hello, and you're very welcome along to our second broadcast from the Count Centre in the IFA election here in Castleknock in County Dublin. We're here to find out who's going to be the next president of IFA, the next deputy president of IFA, and who will be the next Munster chairman of the association. I'm joined by Diarmuid Lally, Meath County chairman of IFA, Mairead Lavery, IFA editor of Irish Country Living and Irish Country magazine, and again joined by Patrick Donohoe, who's our news correspondent of the Irish Farmers Journal. Mairead, to you first. We're now at lunchtime. What is the update on tallies so far?
Well, everybody's gone off to have their dinner, which is useful, and there's a lot of talking and a lot of people in corners wondering how things have turned out and being surprised at some of the results. We're probably about a quarter, maybe a third way through the count, and we're reckoning a valid poll of around 23, maybe 24,000. I think that'd be roughly. So to get first past the post at 50.
Where's that in other years compared to just?
Well, you see, in the past, well, I think it's running fairly well against last year, which again would be against a lot of the commentary, yeah. But this time, of course, it's one woman, one man per vote. And we never really counted votes like that before. It was really the branch result that you were looking for.
So who's out in front?
So where we are at the moment, in terms of the presidential election, Joe Healy is well out in front. He's on 5,426 votes, followed up by Florrie McCarthy on 3,803 and Henry Burns on 2,580. Now bear in mind that it's mostly Munster that have been counted so far. In terms of the Henry Burns constituency, we're talking about Laois, Kildare, Kilkenny not really being addressed at all yet. So it's a big Munster vote. Galway hasn't voted yet, and we're expecting at least, nearly 4,000 votes out of Galway. So if you reckon on a valid poll of 24,000 votes, first past the post is 12. Joe is already heading for 6. If he pulls another 4 out of Galway, he's got very little to do to win this election.
Are we heading towards a declaration after the first count?
It's going to be very, very close, but my guess is yes.
And when you talk about some of the constituencies, Pat, and we move on to you, yes, Henry Burns has some ground to make up there. He's trailing. Is it a surprise that Joe Healy is so far ahead of, say, Florrie McCarthy from a largely Munster vote? And secondly, can Henry close that gap when he has maybe perhaps a lesser vote to draw on?
The first gap Henry needs to close is the one with Flor. If Joe doesn't make it over the line, the last remaining candidate will be eliminated, and their votes distributed among the other two. And at the moment, Henry and Flor are locked in a battle to see who can finish second. Should we need a second count, they're going to have to transfer very strongly from each other to make this a contest. Is it a surprise? I think the surprise is that the Red Sea poll, which we took at the very start of the election, is being almost completely borne out by the results here.
Yeah.
What were the results of those?
Joe Healy was on 52%, Florrie McCarthy on 18%, and Henry Burns on 32%. But what was really striking about that poll, when we broke back into the numbers, whether it was IFA members or all farmers polled, we polled 1,000 farmers, only slightly more than half of them were IFA members. The vote was the same. Whether we looked at sectoral, and we broke it down by sector, dairy, beef, it changed a little but not much. Naturally, Henry and Flor, two dry stock farmers, did better on the dry stock. Joe did a little better out of the dairy farmers, but Joe did very well out of the dairy farmers, but held his own with dry stock and tillage farmers. If we looked at region, if we looked at farm size, age, gender, it did not matter. Joe was holding almost half the votes. And here we are 2 months on, 25 hustings later. There's been an awful lot of effort put in by all the campaign teams, but Joe is holding pretty much the same ground. And it shows the farmers made their minds up early on this. They wanted a change, they wanted a fresh voice. Joe came from outside, but I think we can't underestimate the influence of the dairy vote.
Yeah.
We have a dairy farmer here and he might tell us about that.
That's what I was going to say, Diarmuid, as Meath County Chairman, you're the one on the ground more than any of us. Is this a surprise to you as Meath County Chairman?
Not so much as County Chairman, but I have to contradict Pat in his analysis maybe. Elections is about going out asking for the vote. Joe Healy had the biggest team out there.
Yeah.
He asked for the vote. This thing of that you can go and only meet 2 or 3 people in a county and hope to win a county, that's off the wall sort of stuff. If you want to win elections, you must get down and meet as many people, or your agents, or your friends, or family. You have to do the work. Joe Healy's team has done the work. that's why he's ahead.
And just give us a bit of insight as the person who was in charge of Eddie Downey's campaign in 2013. Like, how just important is, I know this year the IFA tried to maybe roll back a little bit on door-to-door canvassing.
Yeah.
Just how important is it getting out and pressing the flesh?
Look at it, I didn't actually think the time of year made such a difference, and it does. You know, the time of year is desperate this time of the year. You know, farmers don't have time to listen to themselves, never mind to listen to anyone else. But you must ask for a vote. You ask any politician, anyone, if it's only to be on the school council. If you don't get out there and ask for the vote, and this talk that farmers weren't, or you know, that the canvass was meant to be made different, that was pie in the sky stuff. If a person isn't asked, they're not going to come out to vote. You know, I'm even surprised that the turnout is as good as it is, because there was not much canvassing done. There was not. And
how different is it, as you know, as a veteran of many elections now? Not calling you old, but how is it different to any other election, do you think?
Look, I didn't get involved in this one for obvious reasons.
Absolutely.
But I've probably been around 5 or 6 IFA elections, and you know, it gets frenetic and it gets interesting when there's strong teams out canvassing. Now, obviously, the candidates has to be of a calibre, and I think the 3 men that ran in the presidential were of a very even calibre. But once you get out, it's all about engaging with people, coming back to them and making them feel part of the process. Yeah. And probably this spring, you know, maybe a lot of people didn't get that heavily involved in it for a variety of reasons. Springtime is just a bad time, you know.
Sorry, can I just make one point there? Because I don't think that my point and Diarmuid's points contradict each other at all, because Joe had a very motivated team on the ground, but it was made up of those. There were dairy discussion groups on the ground. We saw Tim O'Leary be the first to do that the last time. Joe has repeated that trick this time. You had former Mockra colleagues from all over the country in their own counties. He brought new people in who'd never been seen on an IFA canvas before getting out. So I think you're right. He took advantage of those things who were backing him.
You just can't rely, you know, you have to bring in your family, your neighbours and your friends to any of these elections. And there's no doubt about it, this campaign has been really gruelling on the candidates, because they've come through, you know, a 3-month bloodletting within IFA, which has been very, very significant.
What was the rollout of 25 hustings or 26? Was that madness?
I think it is madness. Yeah. I think I can't see why. Well, of course, the plan was that there wouldn't be a really significant canvass, and therefore to make it easy for people that they wouldn't have to travel long distances, you do it in individual counties. But where there's a big canvass, you don't need to be pulling all these people.
Mairead is right to an extent. Like, it was madness having 27, 29, how many there was at the end. Like, that's grueling stuff. It's hard on the candidates, because after the 3rd or 4th one, any of them could do each other's speeches. It's hard on the canvassers, because you have to have a party of people there to show that the team is strong. But you go, and even Navan was one of the bigger ones, probably more the better ones. But you strip out the 6 teams, the 6 candidates, their family members, take out the county executive members that are going to be there anyway. How many was
there 20 votes at each meeting?
Well, there was.
Uncounted votes. Most people there, you're right. Most of the people in the room were committed to one candidate or the other.
That's the other side of it. That's the other side of it. A lot of the people in there has their minds made up.
And just give me a mindset. Give me an example of a mindset of a campaign manager who's the person behind it. And you know, obviously you were successful 2 years ago or 3 years ago. But when you're going into a county that you know you aren't going to do well in, like how can you keep your candidate going?
I suppose this is one of the issues this time was the one person, one vote, Mairead, or one woman, one vote. That put a whole new. Okay, let's go.
Well, you have to round them up in ones. I mean, you count votes in ones, one way or the other.
But let's go back before when it was the branch. If you went into a county that you knew you weren't doing well in, or even into a branch you knew you weren't doing well in, you then, as the campaign manager or the person over that county, you made a decision. Do we push on and try and get more votes in this? And a lot of the times you say no, because what are you going to do? Turn out bigger numbers for your opposition.
Exactly.
But this time that wasn't the case. Every branch, even if you weren't well got in, you still had a chance of taking 10, 15, 20, 30% of the votes. Yeah. So that was a whole new dynamic this time, and it was hard to get a handle on that.
And Mairead, again, as somebody who played an integral role in John Dillon's campaign, give us a mindset on the people watching there about which counties do you go after? Like, which are the Ohio
my thing always
authorities?
was with Limerick, you went the first 100 branches, Limerick, Clare. You guarded Clare with your life. The next 100, Kerry, North Cork, West Cork, around, and you rippled out. There was no point in going up to Longford or going to Louth or somewhere like that. No, well, yeah, you see. But there was, if you weren't going to get and pulling big support out of it. I remember Kilkenny had very big branches. Like an awful lot of the branches in Kelly have 70, 80 members. You could be spending, like, send 3 teams up there and they wouldn't only canvass a branch in a day. And what was you going to get out of it? You were far better off looking at where your support was. And like Flor McCarthy here, the one thing I'm noticing in this election, he hasn't held Munster. He would have needed to hold West Cork, Limerick, Cork Central, North Cork. He would have absolutely, instead of being up maybe canvassing in Roscommon or canvassing in Donegal, it was his home counties that he needed.
How has he done in those regions you mentioned?
But a lot of them haven't been opened yet now, but I know Joe Healy is doing very well in Donegal as well.
Pat, as somebody who's written about many elections at this stage, your own sense of things compared to 2013, compared to 2009, 2005, and so on?
I think we've seen a strong sectoral vote this time. I think dairy farmers have strongly voted for Joe Healy. In my own county, I think
is that because dairy prices are
on the floor? He's the only dairy farmer in the race. He's the first dairy president, should he be elected, since Patrick Walsh. When Joe Healy was president of Mairead, John Donnelly was president of IFA. Since then, Patrick Walsh is the only man in 20 years from the dairy sector to hold the presidency of IFA, which used to be the exclusive preserve of dairy farmers. So there's a sense dairy farming is on the floor. It's in crisis, and farmers need. They want strong leadership in IFA to represent their sector. I think the other thing that's crucial about this is that there's a sense of urgency about Joe Healy needs to hit the ground running. There's always a sense of urgency, but you've got crucial issues around income, of governance, but also TTIP, Mercosur, and Diarmuid and his fellow members on the Executive Council are going to be working very hard with the new president, I assume, to get the show on the road.
Mairead?
Just one thing I would do, I'm looking around here at the moment, looking out at the crowd, and spare a thought for the children of the candidates.
And the wives.
Well, particularly the kids who believe that daddy, because it's all daddy in this case, is an absolute hero, who can't do no wrong. And they're going to be disappointed here today. Lots of teenagers, because that's the way the thing works. So just, it's a hard day on families.
Diarmuid?
It's a very hard day on families.
This is a very tough day on families. But I suppose the other side of it is they will have their daddy back. Because when daddy gets one of these jobs, he's gone for 4 years.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone should underestimate what that is. I think that's tough.
Mairead, bring us up to date. It's not the only election, the presidential one. We still have Munster chairman,
yes,
and Pat, maybe on to you for the deputy afterwards.
Yes. Well, I'm not. We have to open the Munster branches now, and they expect the declaration there at around 3 o'clock. So that's only happening after lunch.
And Pat, an intriguing kind of debate in itself, an election itself, the deputy.
Yeah, the deputy one, to be honest, there's some strong parallels. Again, we've the only dairy candidate, the former Mucker president, Richard Kennedy's out in front. And while he's a Munster candidate leading in Munster, that's to be expected. The other two are likely to come back. The problem for Pat Farrell and Nigel Reenhan, they're running neck and neck at the moment, and they're both well back. So one of them needs to jump away from the other and get close to Richard Kennedy, or the transfers won't fill the gap. Richard is the favourite to win now.
It would be very, very difficult to see the transfers going any way more than 2 to 1.
Yeah.
And at that rate of going, Richard Kennedy.
So we can all agree Joe Healy, Richard Kennedy most likely to be the next leadership.
Look, I haven't been in as long as you people have. The deputy one, there could be a bit to play yet in it, sort of thing, But I think, just my own feeling, sort of more gut feeling than any great thesis behind it, is that Richard Kennedy is picking up a lot of what I might call safe votes. He's polling in every county.
Explain that, yeah.
In fairness, Richard didn't have a big presence in County Meath, but he would pick up votes, and people would know him from his Mairead days.
Yeah.
And I'd say there's probably some of maybe the more stalwart IFA people will say, they may have taken a view Joe Healy is probably the front runner here. It would be good to have maybe a steady hand.
Okay.
And I think Richard is going to pick up votes in every county, and from that point of view, I think he'd be hard beaten. But then if we get into transfers, you know, there could be a while to play in it, but it looks, at this stage, it looks like Joe Healy and Richard Kennedy.
Firstly to Mairead and then finally to Pat, to sum up, Mairead, how important is alphabetical order on the ballot sheet?
If it's a well-canvassed team...
Huge Mairead is the answer you're really saying, isn't it?
Well, there's an awful lot of votes inside there looking at them coming out of the boxes, 1, 2, 3 in alphabetical order. But there's an awful lot of plunkers as well, just like one vote, or plumpers, is that the word you use, where they just voted X.
I don't think any of them like to be called plunkers.
Yeah.
And Pat, finally, what's the next steps before we come back at 6 o'clock to broadcast?
Well, the Munster regional chair, it's the only regional election. That's a strange system because it's an amalgam of the two. They're counting one vote in there at the moment, but they're also counting the number of votes from each branch. And the weighted branch vote kicks in. The branch officers voted. So if we take, say, my own branch in Ferns, there was, I know the turnout there was 43. That will equate to 2 branch votes per branch officer. That's the chairman, the secretary, the returning officer, and the 4th delegate. So those 4 people will have 2 votes each from Ferns. If it was over 50, it would be 3. If it was over 75, it would be 4. And that's why they're counting the Munster votes first. Then they will see how the delegates voted for either John O'Brien or John Coughlin. Add in the weighting, and we'll have a result quite quickly. So that's going to be an interesting one.
But it's the only election where IFA has removed the franchise from members for their regional representative, which personally I think was a bad move.
Okay, sorry, Diarmuid.
As against that,
final word to Diarmuid.
I don't think there was enough thought given to going away from the branch voting. I know in our own county we did discuss it at length, and the initial thing was one man, one vote, but when people discussed it then, they went back to no, and if you go back to the Ferns where 44 people turned out, if there was
53 the last time.
I guarantee you, if there was a good canvass going on, there would be 53, there would be 8 more people or 9 more people found to come in to get that weighted up, and that's good for the organisation as well.
Yeah, you need to give the impetus to turn out.
Great. Look, Diarmuid Lally, Meath, IFA County Chairman, Mairead Lavery, Editor of Irish Country Living, Irish Country Magazine, Pat O'Toole, News Correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. Thank you all very much for tuning in. We will be back at between 6 and 6:30 to bring you the latest updates, and we might even have maybe a president, maybe a Munster chairman, we never know. So if you stay tuned to farmersjournal.ie for all the updates live from the IFA Count Centre in Castleknock, Dublin.